Alright, so Shara Magomedov continued his legacy of only winning against absolute tomato cans by beating Marc-Andre Barriault at UFC Abu Dhabi. And I don't know what other people aren't seeing here, but I really don't think that this guy is all that good, man. I mean, obviously he's good. He's in the UFC and he's winning fights. He's clearly a good fighter. But in comparison to UFC caliber competition, I think that this guy is mediocre at best. And my thoughts of him as a fighter have nothing to do with where he's from or what religion he believes in, but this guy is just as much of a can crusher as Sean O'Malley was when he first hit the UFC, except I feel like Sean actually showed a much higher striking pedigree compared to what we've seen out of Magomedov so far. And much like Sean, when they gave Shara a real test against a legitimate fighter and he came up short, they've gone right back to spoon feeding him guys that they'll know that he'll beat. And unlike Khabib or Islam or even Umar Nurmagomedov, who were all pushed hard by the UFC but have proven to have the skills to back it up, Shara's getting pushed by the UFC every bit as hard, but his performances just don't justify the level of shine that he's been getting. Also, before anyone starts commenting that I'm a Shara Bullet hater, then you're right, yes I am, but I don't dislike this guy because he's a can crusher. I dislike this guy for his actions outside the cage. And yeah, in this video I'll be talking about Shara Bullet, and if we still have time then I'll give you my thoughts on RDR versus Whitaker as well as Petr Yan versus Marcus McGee. But first, let's talk about the fight itself. Look, Shara clearly won the fight, there's no doubt about that, and outside of like maybe 2 minutes in the second round, I'd argue that he won the fight pretty damn easily. I definitely scored rounds 1 and 3 for him because he whooped Barriault's ass in them, and even in spite of getting his nose caved in by an overhand right in round 2, he was still able to regain control of the fight, and I'd probably score this round for him as well. Shara is quick, he's unorthodox, and he fights at a very high volume. Not just in this fight, but in all of his other UFC wins, he's displayed that he does have legitimate, tangible good qualities as a fighter, but why am I left feeling so unimpressed by his 5-1 UFC record? Well, maybe it's because the guys he's beaten are complete cans, where nearly all of them have a negative win-loss ratio in the promotion. Let's start off with Magomedov's UFC debut against Bruno Silva. Silva's currently 4-7 in the UFC, and more importantly, the guy has not won a single fight in over 2 years, where he's currently on a 5-fight losing streak. Bruno, much like a lot of the other guys I'm about to bring up, is used by the UFC as a means to prop up the guys that they want to make look good. His next fight was against Antonio Trocoli, who was a 2-day notice replacement and had already been cut from the UFC prior. Similarly to when the UFC pulled Chris Moutinho out of the regional scene as a last-minute replacement to give Sean O'Malley the maximum chance of winning, they pulled the same exact stunt here to cater to Magomedov. Trocoli signed the contract on Thursday, flew from Brazil to Saudi Arabia that same day, got off the plane, went straight to the sauna, cut 15 pounds that night, and then went to step on the scale. The UFC blatantly stacked the deck in Shara's favor in this fight. They could have tried to find a fight-ready opponent for him who was already a UFC fighter, but instead they looked outside the promotion to maximize his odds at winning. Regardless, Trocoli is 0-2 in the promotion and is just not a UFC caliber fighter. His next fight was against Mikhail Oleksiejczuk, who, believe it or not, is actually Magomedov's best win in his career, despite Oleksiejczuk being 7-7 in the UFC by the time that they fought. Mikhail was also riding a 2-fight losing streak heading into this fight, but in all fairness, those losses were to Michel Pereira and Kevin Holland, who are clearly better fighters than him. When you include the Shara fight, Oleksiejczuk went 0-3 in 2024, and even though I think he does have a place in the UFC, at least for a little while longer, he's always going to be used as a stepping stone for fighters who have a bigger name than him, which is exactly why they put him up with Michel, Kevin, and Shara. The guy is also a tailor-made opponent for a guy like Shara. Mikhail's slow, doesn't know how to close distance, and doesn't excel anywhere to the point where he can be a threat anywhere. Then there was Armen Petrosyan. This is probably the flashiest of Shara's wins because of the double spinning back fist KO, and I won't lie, that shit was cool as hell. But Armen was coming off of a loss, he's slow, and also doesn't know how to fight from the outside. His game is tailor-made for Shara to style on, which is exactly what happened. Armen is 3-4 in the UFC and is currently on a 3-fight losing streak. And of course, we have Marc-Andre Barriault from this past weekend. Barriault is now 6-9 in the UFC, which I would like to point out that many fighters have been cut despite having better records than this, but much like Mikhail Oleksiejczuk, he's a guy that the UFC needs to prop up the other guys that they want to see win. Mikhail's been a sacrificial lamb for Shara Bullet, Chris Curtis, and Joe Pyfer. He's also 1-4 in his last 5 fights, with his only win being over Bruno Silva. Bruno might actually be the worst male fighter in the UFC right now. Do you guys see what I'm trying to say here? The UFC is protecting this guy. Instead of putting him up against legit unranked fighters like Gregory Rodriguez, Bruno Ferreira, or even Edmund Shabazian, they keep giving him guys that he has several distinct advantages over. The combined UFC records of the guy that Shara's beaten is 21-29, but it gets even more ridiculous when you look at their more recent performances. Since 2024, Bruno Silva, Antonio Trocoli, Mikhail Oleksiejczuk, Armen Petrosyan, and Marc-Andre Barriault have gone a combined 2-15. 2-15, and one of those wins was Bruno Silva. Do not tell me that the UFC isn't doing all that they can to make him look good. Do not tell me that they're not artificially inflating his stock by giving him preferable matchups. Do not tell me that this guy is not a can crusher. I feel like anybody who's even remotely paying attention to this guy's career can see the egregious level of handholding that the UFC is doing for this guy, but I guess somehow people don't, because when I check out Instagram or Twitter, people completely ignore the fact that he's styling on cans. I really feel like people are only seeing half the picture here. Sure, he's looked pretty good in his wins, but is it not easy to look good when he's fighting a conveyor belt of guys that are handpicked to make him look good? Don't get me wrong, I do think he is a UFC caliber guy. I totally think that he belongs here, and you can make a lot of interesting fights with the guy, but making those interesting fights incurs a huge amount of risk when there's a very real likelihood that the weaknesses in his game get exposed, much like what happened in his fight with Michael Venom Page. It's clear to me that he's a Kevin Holland sort of fighter where he's kinda mid but will put on entertaining fights, and there's nothing wrong with that. The UFC needs those sort of fighters like fish need water. What's weird is that they're promoting him not just in their marketing but in the commentary booth like he's the second coming of Anderson Silva. Now this might be a good time to send out the reminder that Shara is a bit of a questionable guy. The dude has a little bit of an anger issue. For example, here's this video where he attacks a guy that submitted him at a jiu-jitsu tournament.
Going for a late, oh! A bit of a confrontation going on over there.
And then there's this video where he sucker punches a guy at a mall after he sees him kissing his girlfriend in public. There is no way I can show this video in its entirety, so I'll just explain it along with providing some screenshots of the altercation. Shara sees a guy kissing his girlfriend in public, which is taboo in that part of the world, and he gets up in the guy's face to confront him and a fight breaks out. They scuffle a little bit until they're separated, but later that day, Shara waits for the guy around a corner so that he can sucker punch him, and as the guy is clearly unconscious, he then stomps on the guy's head. That head stomp is inexcusable. If you guys want to see the whole video, I will link it in the description. And speaking of head stomps, did anybody notice that at the very end of his fight with Barrio, as Marc-Andre is laying on the ground, Magomedov definitely raises his leg up over his head? I'm gonna give him the benefit of the doubt here and just say that this was some sort of showboat, but even still, I think it's unnecessary. I mean, it's not like Shara was trying to get his leg free or anything. Barrio wasn't grabbing it or even had contact with it in any way, so him raising his leg over his head just seems more out of spite than anything else. All the same, this guy is a can crusher of the highest order, and I really feel like a lot of his appeal is based around the fact that he looks like a badass pirate. I hope the UFC starts giving him real challenges soon, but I guess we'll see. Okay, I promised to talk about the main and co-main events of this card, so I'll give you my thoughts on them really quickly, starting with RDR versus Robert Whitaker. I thought that this was a really close fight, and I don't think that there's anything wrong with scoring the fight for either guy. The people crying about this fight being a robbery are so delusional that they're ignoring the inherent definition of what a robbery decision even is. RDR has mastered the drunken master style art of fighting, and even though his boxing looks ugly, he's still able to get it to work. The offensive knees that he throws are very unique to him, and the fact that he throws it as much as he throws his jab is very interesting as well. That said, I do agree with the judge's decision on this one. I scored rounds 2, 4, and 5 for RDR, and even though the last 2 rounds of the fight was a lot of clinching, it's not like Rob did a lot of damage to offset RDR's control time against the cage.
How confident were you when they were announcing the scorecard that you won?
I thought I was surprised that one judge scored it like completely wrong. I thought I had 3 rounds at least, but yeah, it is what it is. I shouldn't. I hope to finish him, and I didn't. So you never know what the judges make of it, but I'll be sure to finish the next guy again.
I do not understand how De Ridder survived that overhand right that he got hit with in the 3rd round. I genuinely thought we saw a live execution when it happened. Whitaker looked not great. Of course, that version of Rob would still beat almost every single UFC middleweight except for the very top guys, but I do think that this was one of the worst versions of Rob that we've seen in a while. And I am not taking into consideration his performance against Khamzat because Chimaev just did what he does and steamrolled him, but when it comes to fights that Rob goes the full 5 rounds in, this was probably the worst that we've ever seen him look. I fear that Rob's time in the sun is officially over, but there's still a lot of interesting fights that you can make with him with the guys that are ranked 6 to 15. Petr Yan is still a beast, and at this point it's a total cliche to say that once he downloads his opponent's tendencies, he takes over the fight, so I guess I'll just say that he's making a very real case for the next title shot. Marcus McGee is no joke, and I think that he did pretty well given the circumstances of the fight, but he was just not on Yan's level on Saturday. These 2 orc-looking dudes put on a Muay Thai clinic, and I'm confident that McGee is going to bounce back from this fight looking way better. Petr Yan versus Umar Nurmagomedov to determine who's next for Merab after he beats Corey Sandhagen. Anyways, that is the video for today. Definitely let me know your thoughts on Shara Magomedov. Do you think I'm being too harsh with my criticisms, and who would you have him fight next? As always, if you like the video, then like the video, and if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please do so. I appreciate you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.
Shara Magomedov, not as good as we thought he was. Let's just call it what it is. It was a fun project. It was a fun bit of an experiment. Crazy fight, by the way. Not what we thought he was. But this fight, it was like, okay, Marc-Andre's not all that talented, and he hasn't really got range or speed or power, and he's still giving Shara a really tough time. And this is the problem with Shara. His low kicks are pretty good, and his kicks are very good and very dynamic. His boxing is very weak. He doesn't have power in his hands to get respect, and his clinch work saves him a lot of the time because His boxing's weak. His boxing's very weak, and his hands are very weak. He doesn't have any power or pop in his shots. Great scrap, though. Really fun fight to watch. I just don't think Shara's going to be a top dog. We move on.